Hello guys, welcome back to Pause and welcome back to Planet Coaster and welcome back to Clapboard Studios, our movie studio park here using the Studios pack in Planet Coaster. Now today we're back with the Back to the Future roller coaster indoor dark ride. So today we're going to build some props and scenes from the movies, including using some art shapes. I'm going to try and get things like the hoverboard made, using a lot of clocks and also a couple of billboards and screens to get some scenes and characters from the movies into this ride. I'm also planning to make a little movie at the launch at the start where Doc Brown is maybe giving like a very brief introduction. So there's a few things I want to try and a few things that we're going to try and put into this ride to try and make it a cohesive experience. But generally it's going to be a dark coaster where illuminated scenes are dotted throughout the ride that will light up as you go past, going through different scenes, props and things like that from the Back to the Future series. So that's the plan. So let's jump into a time lapse as I'm putting a few of these bits together, and then I'll talk through what we're doing over the top of the video just to give you a little bit more information. Okay, so we're going to start with my recreation of the hoverboard, which I believe was from Back to the Future 2, I think. So Martin McFly's hoverboard, the very sort of pink, garish Mattel, sort of 80s, 90s style modern hoverboard. There's a picture, I'll stick a picture up here just so you can see what it's meant to look like. So I'm going to make a very rough recreation using some of the art shapes. Now this prop is only going to be seen for a couple of seconds as you fly past it in the ride, so it's not 100% accurate or detailed, but it gives a very good impression and a very good a very good glance that you know what it is. If you've seen the movies, you'll recognise it. It's a very recognisable item, prop, so that's what we're going for. So this actually is the second attempt of this prop. So I had the dreaded bug where the game crashes when you're using the art pieces and the gimbal for moving things around. In fact, it's actually the first time I've ever had a crash using the XY axis features, movement features. So yeah. I'm finally joining the team of people who have had that annoying crash. I pretty much got the design finished on the other one and then the game just froze and I lost everything. So it's fine. This is the second version of the footage. I mean, I still have the footage of it, I just don't have the actual board, so there's pointless putting that in this video. So it's very much, like you can see here, a pink background with various just 90s shapes running up and down it. I mean, anyone who's a bit of a 90s kid will probably recognise this kind of style from a tracksuit your mum might have wore back then, or maybe your weird auntie, I don't know. But this is the kind of design that was all the rage in the 90s. So obviously for the movie of when the Back to the Future came out, and they wanted to try and make it look really futuristic, so they used quite a lot of 90s features with a modern twist. I mean, if you look back on that now, I think, from what I remember, I think it's actually set in 2015, Back to the Future 2, and I mean, the fact that there's a hoverboard in it shows that they obviously thought the future would be a lot better than it actually is, in terms of technology anyway. So anywho, here we are putting in the ride. There's a couple of little wooden platforms there just holding it up, and I'll just test a few ideas with lighting. The thing we go for in the end is just a one spot, fades on, fades off, which is done on a trigger. Like I've mentioned a few times, and just for anybody who's new to this series, I'll explain what we're doing. So, pardon me, I've got a bit of a sore throat, so apologies if I'm coughing. Anywho, so yeah, the idea is, if you've been on a dark coaster, so there's been a couple in the UK, no longer operating unfortunately, but there were a couple. The Black Hole Alton Towers used to be in the big black tent. We used to have, what was it called, Space Invader, I think it was called, in Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I mean, the building for that is still there actually. It's just next to Nickelodeon Land. It's where the pasta restaurant is now. That used to house an indoor coaster. I mean, the only one really in the UK that's still operating is X No Way Out. Well, it's now The Walking Dead. at Thorpe Park. Basically, that's the style of attraction we're going for. So to put it into a comparison with something abroad, Rocky Roller Coaster, Space Mountain at Disney, those kind of attractions, Revenge of the Mummy at Universal. So the general idea is that as you're whizzing through the high-speed roller coaster, there are scenes, props, and screens and all that kind of stuff around you as you're flying through, tediously linked to the movies, and that's the theme I'm going for with this ride. I could do it as a complete full dark ride, but I don't think this warrants that, as that's going to come down the line when we do the sort of haunted attraction. There will be some kind of other sci-fi attraction in this park as well, so there's other opportunities to do full-on themed dark rides. So what we're doing here is using these wonderful 88-mile-an-hour signs that came with the Back to the Future pack. I'm putting them around the track. We had a few more towards the end of the video as well. So from the perspective of the train as you're whizzing through, it's as if you're going the best way to describe where my mindset is for this video, for anybody who's been on the Tower of Terror, the Florida version of the Tower of Terror, there's a scene in that, I believe it's called like the Fifth Dimension scene or something, which is the bit where the elevator travels forward through a sort of Twilight Zone style theme, and in there you've got like big eyes, and you've got like clocks and things moving around the edges of you, to give a kind of like really weird feeling that you're travelling through like a different dimension and time and all that kind of stuff. And the Disney effect works really well, to the stage where I've been very theme park obsessed my entire life really. And I went on the original Tower of Terror in Florida the year it opened, 1994, when I was 6 years old, back when it used to just do one drop. And that image of going through that scene and seeing the sort of big eye and all the clocks and that just weird scene has always struck and remained in my head. It's pretty much one of the only memories I have from that whole trip, from back then. Obviously I've been on it since, so I now know what it looks like in my actual memory, but it's just something that's always stuck with me. So that is the sort of mindset and the vision that I've had for this ride really, is little scenes like that. And this first bit with the 88 miles an hour is just the start of that really. One thing I mentioned here, that I will go into a bit more detail towards the end, but I'm trying to make this ride as realistic as possible. So if there is a light or a bit of a prop, a bit of theming, a screen, anything like that, I want it to be as realistic as possible. So I'm going to put in supports, and in some cases maybe even wiring, projectors, things like that, just to generally, in the daylight, it will look real, and just so for peace of mind I can know it's there. To try and make it as realistic as possible. I don't want anything floating, but then in the dark you're not going to see any of it anyway. Like all the support structure for these 88 miles an hour signs, as you go through the ride in the dark you don't even see it, so it's completely pointless, but it makes me feel better that it's there and it's realistic. The next thing we do is we use some of the big clock pieces to kind of make the next scene, as I'm carrying on this theme of like going through time for this first portion of the ride. Those clocks act as part of that. Here is just a little bit of a rock wall. This is just to kind of block the view from this angle of the ride, and that's just kind of set on a steady strobe. Because again, as you can see, I'm going to wall in each of the areas as we get to it. And this first one, we've just used the star walls to just give it a bit of a texture as you're going through. And it kind of fits the theme of space travel and time travel and all that kind of stuff. So it tediously links. So each area and each scene will have it kind of cap off. So at least you don't see the other scenes from the other parts of the ride, so nothing's spoiled. And again, it might look like I've just put a wall down the middle, but that's how rides work in the real world. Even some of the big ones will have just scrim or a bit of cloth or something really tacky separating the scenes. I mean, it is just how it is in these kind of rides, as they're never meant to be seen in the daylight. So they are quite tacky on the inside. I mean, I've mentioned it briefly in another video, but using Universal Studios as a prime example of this, the Revenge of the Mummy ride has got kind of like UV scenes of like scary faces and mummy heads and that kind of stuff as you're going through the ride. And they was basically just cardboard cutouts stuck on like a bit of truss with a flashing light shining out of it. And this is in the Universal Studios park, so even the big boys do skimp on certain elements. So I am not opposed to joining them and saving a little bit of money in my imaginary park by doing the same thing. So you might see random little areas like the walls where there's just a bit of black or a bit of a star cloth or something just to break it up. But when you're on the ride in the perspective of the guest, you don't really notice it, and it just adds to the experience. So here is the area I was talking about with the clocks. I've used a couple of different sorts, as there's a few in the game. The big ones that light up are brilliant for this, as it works so well. The little ones unfortunately don't light up, so I've had to use some strobes on them. I've toned the colour down to a sort of a grey, so there's not much light spilling out. But generally I think it gives quite a good effect. I'll probably go back and add a few more clocks to this scene just to bump it out a little bit, because you do actually go quite slow around this corner on the coaster. And then this is then going to link into the next scene of the ride, where the first inversion, so the big vertical loop, is. So that's going to be the sort of first main scene. There's a couple of times you might see me like that going into the POV. It's just so I can get an idea of if my vision's actually working and it looks decent from on ride. And for the most part, it looks quite good, to be fair. The vision is kind of in my head, it's there. So yeah, I'm quite happy with it. So all I'm going to do at the end bit just here is add a couple more of these 88 miles an hour. It's looking a bit bare, you go through it quite quick on the ride, so I just wanted to extend it up towards this airtime hill. And I also hang some from the ceiling as well, again just to give it so you've got a 360 degree experience as you're travelling through the ride. So there's going to be a bit of a not slow motion, there's going to be some live action footage at the end where I show you all this in a lot more detail. But don't expect a POV anytime soon. That will come as soon as this ride is finished. I've got quite a lot more left to do, as I need to get some videos done for billboards. My plan is to get Doc Brown and some kind of speech to introduce you to the ride. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but I've got a few ideas in my head, so that's something that we'll try and do between episodes, and I'll stick them in the ride at some point. So while that's being done, don't expect any kind of full POV, but there will be one eventually, so look forward to that. So yeah, we're basically coming to the end of the footage, guys, so there's not really much left to speak about today. Hope you've enjoyed this little bit of a footage. Like I say, let's have some closer in-depth look now at what we've done today. Okay, so let's have a closer look at what we've done today. So we've added this first scene with all the 88 miles an hour signs that are just dotted around the track, so as you're flying through it gives you that kind of impression you're entering into this Back to the Future world. Then down here we come to our first themed prop. So we've got this hoverboard which is made out of art shapes. This is triggered as the train comes down, so it sort of fades on, lights up, and there's a near miss with the rock just at the end that a strobe appears just as the train comes. So the train coming just now, so I'll show you how this looks. So yeah, that fades on and off, and the rock lights up at the end. The next scene we've done here, we've just added some of these clocks around, so as you're speeding past, gives the impression that you're going through time. Some of them are flashing, some of them are just on standard, just on their standard lighting, and they're all at different angles. It kind of gives a very Tower of Terror kind of Twilight Zone kind of feel through this area. There's a few more clocks down there, and that's going to lead into the section where we have the loop. So there's going to be another scene heading down that way as you go into that loop area just there. But so far, guys, that is the effect so far. There's a few floating lights and things at the moment, but those will be rectified as we go through. As you can see from the daylight, I'm trying to make this as realistic as possible in terms of the way these effects are working. So everything has got a kind of support. Obviously in the dark you don't really notice that, but these are all connected via a kind of framework. either to the track or on their own supports. And again, this is just to give it a little bit of realism throughout the ride. The same for the clocks that are on the next scene. They are all either hanging from the ceiling. Oh, a bit too high. Yeah, either hanging from the ceiling, or they are just on posts or walls. And that's generally how I'm going to go through this ride, try to make it as realistic as possible. Even down to the hoverboard has its own wooden supports holding it up. Now obviously we never see that on the ride, but I just like to have a little bit of realism there. So this is kind of how the ride is going to work. There's going to be odd little bits of theming here and there, giving the impression of scenes from the movie. This is the first one we've done, and there'll be plenty more coming soon. So that is today's video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please give us a like down below. Any queries, questions, comments or suggestions, drop those down as well, and we'll be back in a couple of days for another episode from this Back to the Future Dark Ride, as we hopefully get the rest of the ride done, as we've got a good portion of the ride done today, and then once we're finished we'll have a full POV. So cheers for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.